Hey Aaron, how's it going?
Hey, Smeet, it's going good. How are you?
Good, good. Do you want me to let everyone in or
We can wait until right at 7. Give people a
oh,
few minutes. I
sounds
mean,
good.
we're probably gonna give them like 5 minutes
7:05,
or
right?
so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense. Are you doing the Instagram live tomorrow or is that Amelia?
It's gonna be Amelia again. We decided it was probably best for it to be consistent. So have the same
Makes
person
sense, makes
interviewing.
sense. Yep, makes sense. And then how's the publications election and stuff going?
Oh, that's a problem in and of itself.
I see. COVID and stuff, I'm guessing, just the online aspect of everything.
Yeah. We gotta push a little bit harder to get our nominations in.
Makes sense,
We've
makes sense.
we've opened up our period a little bit longer, so we're gonna try and push as much as we can. We ended up pushing our AGM back like 2-3 weeks. So
Okay, okay, I see what you mean. Is this like your last year or
yeah, this is my last year. Yeah.
it's a 2-year term for you, right?
Yeah, generally it's only like presidents only do 1 term, so like SU pres. But I decided to come back for another year because I mean, what else was I doing?
Makes sense.
But next year I'm going into my master's program, so
Okay, that's pretty sick.
definitely not gonna
Laurier
have
or
the time for
somewhere
that.
else?
What?
Or Laurier or somewhere else?
Yeah, Laurier.
Oh, okay, that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
I'm guessing Waterloo, right?
Hmm?
I'm guessing Waterloo.
Yeah.
And then what are you mastering in?
History. So they have a joint program. So it's like Laurier, UW, and then U Guelph. So pretty
Okay,
pretty interested in it.
yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Joseph in to see if his audio is working.
Good idea. I would make sure. I would honestly. I would just get him to call in right away. Let's not
Yeah.
try and mess around with that again.
Hey, Joseph, how's it going? He's connected. Me is here also.
Hey there, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, excellent. I'm thinking before we get started, could one of you post a phone number in the chat? So
Yeah.
the phone will go in as soon as.
A little bit better lighting. Oh,
There you go.
Brilliant.
yeah.
Still doing all right today?
I am doing great. Had a nice weekend, rested and relaxed, ready for the week to come. How about you?
Not too bad. It's been a bit of a long weekend, but
I
here we
bet.
come up the home stretch this week.
Yep. Guys are in the home stretch. Always the most stressful, always the most fun.
You're right, man.
It'll all be over soon. And then the
Are you
real
calling in, Joseph?
Sorry?
Are you calling in right now?
Yeah, just dialing in.
That makes sense. How are you doing, PJ?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Not bad, not bad. How was your weekend?
I mean, I took it to like rest and relax and like kind of prepare for this, but I mean, you can't really. It's like it's a tough 2 weeks. I will say that much. How about you?
I'm good. I woke up this morning and sent out like 18 emails.
I feel that one. It is not the most fun.
Oh, for sure.
Not sure if you were trying to talk, Joseph, but both of your mics were muted.
How about now?
Good.
You're good. Your phone is not muted anymore.
Brilliant.
All right. So for anyone who is going to be joining us, we're going to be starting at 7:05. Give anybody who is going to be coming in a chance to do so. Any late stragglers?
Sorry about the raised hand there. I think my thumb slipped when I was tapping in the mute button.
No worries.
Don't know how much time we have, Aaron, but anyone want to break the ice with a joke?
Actually, we are just going to get started now. It is 7:05. So
Brilliant.
last week, at last week's event, we did end up running right to time. So I want to make sure that we keep today's relatively well structured, just because we did get a lot more audience engagement than I was expecting, which is wonderful. I'm hoping to see some more of it tonight. And yeah, I want to make sure that I also give you guys plenty of time so that you can speak equitably. So the way tonight's debate is going to work for anyone who may be joining us for the first time, who may be watching it for the first time later on, or who may just want a refresher. Tonight's debate is going to be split into 3 parts. We're going to have just standard Q&A to begin. We are going to have a section where candidates will have the opportunity to respond to each other's questions and responses. And then we will have a section set aside for audience and questions that have been sent in. So obviously, just as a reminder for anybody who is going to be participating, you can feel free to throw your questions that you'd like to ask candidates in the chat box or send them to the host, Zamid. Just make sure, as a reminder, please make sure you're being respectful with any comments that you're making. Any questions that you might have for candidates, please make sure that you're framing things in the form of a question so that myself, the moderator, can look at them and then judge whether or not they will be asked. And as far as brief introduction goes, my name is Aaron. I'm the president at Wilfrid Laurier University Student Publications. It is my duty, my honor, my privilege to be the moderator for today's event and this month's event as far as student union elections go. And with that being said, I welcome our presidential candidates, Pega and Joseph. Hello. It's wonderful to see you again. I hope you guys had a nice, relaxing weekend, or at least a productive weekend, and you're ready for the long week to come, because it certainly is going to be that, but I'm sure we're all very much looking forward to how everything turns out. So with that being said, why don't we get started? We will begin the same as we did last time. Candidates will have a maximum of 5 minutes for any opening statements they'd like to make. You don't have to use all 5 minutes, but you may use as much time as you feel is appropriate. So we can begin with Joseph, and Joseph, you will have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thanks very much, Aaron. So, over the last couple of hectic weeks, students have been able to see a fair bit of what my team and Pegos have to offer. Our visions for next year, all the campaign platforms and promises that we'd like to deliver to you, the student body. So as far as big spiels go, I don't want to delve into that too heavily tonight, at least not in these opening statements. What I would like to do, knowing that this will be the last public forum, an opportunity that I have to do so, is to issue some thanks to members of the team and folks I've known at Laurier, true leaders who've helped inspire the legacy that I aim to live up to. I've done a great deal of lip service to Rick, of course, but me in the legacy that I'm aiming to live up to. Kevin Burnell, again, our answer, the greatest candidate who never ran. Dana and Mamida, of course, very, very important in forming me and putting me where I am today. I also want to emphasize someone who I've not given a lot of lip service to, whose legacy I'm also aiming to embody next year through my leadership, and that's Talha Naeem, candidate who ran a couple of years ago from the Frankfurt campus. Talha and I have had a number of chats now, and remembering his own style of leadership, best embodied by his slogan, "My friendship, your leadership." That kind of empathetic vision for the union is something that I've not mentioned very much before, but it's something that I really aim to embody with my particular leadership next year. Empathetic openness and a willingness to hear from all Laurier students. Talha believes that, above all else, international students in particular were particularly left out of the fabric of the broader undergraduate student body. And it's not something that comes to the forefront of these debates, Aaron, but it's something I'd like to reiterate here tonight, in that my platform, especially as it pertains to my diversity and equity initiative, makes particular groundwork possible to empower the voices of international students, to make sure that they feel welcome not only within the fabric of the Laurier community, but are able to overcome a lot of the cultural and social barriers that they should not have to contend with on top of the stress of academics, but still do. It's a formative part of their experience, and I applaud them for having had to go through that for so long, especially knowing that their tuition rates are pretty much unregulated, have been for some time. They don't have that peace of mind. And so working with international students in particular next year is a big, big goal of mine. Talha's legacy lives on through the campaign that I aim to embody, and it will live on through my presidency next year, on top of the examples set by so many of those Laurier leaders who, unfortunately, I just don't have time to name all of. Tariq, Kevin, Dana, Mamida, Talha, Mike Delbono, you've all done fantastic work in putting me where I am right here and now. And I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything you've done for me over the last 5 years.
Joseph, thank you very much for your opening remarks. Pega, you now have the opportunity to give your opening remarks. You will have 5 minutes as well.
Okay, so I think just because this is the last debate, I wanted to thank you, Aaron, and anyone from the student publications that's really come out to all these things. I know that it's been a lot of work, and I couldn't thank you guys enough for setting this all up. I know that it's a little weird with COVID and just having this all organized, but I think I've heard so much great feedback from so many different students from these things. So I'm really happy that we've been able to get these going and having students be involved. That being said, I cannot wait to have this week be over. And I think that both me and Joey have worked really hard on our platforms and making sure students are aware of what's going on. And I hope that everyone comes out to vote, and to those who have donated and are planning on participating tomorrow for the virtual 5K, I can't thank you enough. That means so much to me. And my mom for coming, she's here in the Zoom, so thanks, Mom.
Thank you very much, candidates. So obviously last week's debate was a little bit more straightforward. I asked questions, you guys answered them. But I want to give the candidates an opportunity to showcase some of the work they have been putting in as well. So candidates, I just want to let you know there is going to be an opportunity. I will allow for an opportunity for you to ask each other questions once we get to the debate portion. It'll give you a chance to showcase the work that you and your teams have been doing over the past few weeks, showcase your knowledge, all that fun stuff. But we will get started with some of the first round questions. Obviously, I'm not going to repeat a lot of the same questions that I asked last week. They'd be a little repetitive. We want the opportunity to ask some fresh questions to each of you. So with that being said, we will get started. And we'll get started with probably one of the most basic, but I would argue important elements in determining who might make an effective president. And that is, what do you personally believe are some of the most important characteristics required to be an effective Students' Union president? And why do you feel that you embody those characteristics? So it's a question targeted at how well each of you understands the role and why you feel you would be the best suited in that sense. So we will start with Joseph, and you will have 2 minutes.
Put simply, Aaron, the best characteristics that a president should embody in any year, regardless of whether it's lockdown or not, are openness, a willingness to take on new ideas and embrace fresh new faces into the union. On top of that, an understanding of our limitations. I've mentioned it before, but too many presidential candidates, in my opinion, have come and gone over the last 5 years. I've tracked elections, making grand promises and having them shut down as early as day one of their presidencies. Understanding the limitations that a president has as set out by the Constitution of the Union, its policy manual, and via board management delegations and governance processes are going to be instrumental in ensuring that not only can a president achieve their vision, but that they don't give students false hope. It's why I've limited myself from making grand promises like the eternal promise of the Brantford to Waterloo bus line. It's something that plenty of presidential candidates have offered in the past, and it's not going to get done anytime soon. Full-oriented Greek life orientation as well is something that plenty of presidential candidates have discussed in the past. These kind of grand promises, Aaron, capture a broader sentiment that students need to understand, in that progress is incremental, especially as we work with the union and the university next year. Knowing that, as far as Greek life goes in particular, I've set out to create a custom-tailored approach for each different Greek life group that will ensure that progress is made for those groups that want it, rather than assuming that each Greek life group wants a one-size-fits-all approach to getting into collaboration with the union. It's just one example, Aaron, and I could go on, but knowing what we can and can't deliver on and how to effectively make sure that students know what actions we are engaging in is one of the most important characteristics any president should embody next year.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Pega, same question to you. What do you believe are some of the most important characteristics required to be an effective Students' Union president, and why do you feel you embody those characteristics? You'll have the same time.
So I think that it's really important for whoever's president to be able to not only be a team leader, but someone who also is able to work as someone in a team. And I think that really comes down to not only imposing ideas and beliefs and policies, but also making sure that your policies are considering everybody. I think that I have had a great opportunity to meet with so many different people within the past 2 weeks who have given me such great insights about my policy and have given me even more ideas that those are things that I have to be able to do if I were to be president. I think that it's really important to make sure that I'm taking into consideration not just my ideals and my beliefs, because yes, though I have experience in different areas and I do have a vast understanding of different bodies of the university myself, that it's not all encompassing. And I think that it would be very vain of anybody to say that they know exactly what the students need, because I think there's so many different students with so many different demographics that we need to be able to listen to everybody. Further, I think that we also need to be able to communicate well. And I think that I've had a really good opportunity to do so and show that I can in the way that I've managed to campaign, in the sense that I've been able to gather such a large following on the Instagram in such a short period of time, and having so many different students from different bodies of life, from the Brantford campus to those from the Rainbow Center, to reach out to me, people that I wouldn't have had the experience of reaching out to in the time as a student here. So I think that those are all great things that I have been able to find in my role, just by coming to be a member, just by being a candidate. And from outside experience as a board of governor and the Senate, I'm also able to understand things that the students might need in a different light. Just because I am able to see how the administration works in a light that might not necessarily be open to all students.
Thank you very much, candidates. The next question is targeted at engaging with the Laurier student body. Now, you may or may not be aware, the Ownership Linkage Committee is one example of a board group that is dedicated to engaging with the Laurier community, the Laurier ownership, and maintaining a strong connection to the thoughts, opinions, suggestions, and grievances of the student body at large. This year, obviously, they operated in a very limited capacity because they were unable to engage directly with students. With that being said, what is your plan to engage with the Laurier ownership and connect with students either directly or indirectly? And we will start again with Joseph.
All right. So first, Aaron, it's pretty refreshing to mention the Ownership Linkage Committee. Back when I was on the board of directors, I was a member of that committee, back when Zamar Hakim chaired it. So as far as practical experience goes with connecting with ownership, myself and then director Zamar Hakim, along with Emily Rose-Calla, worked to develop practical solutions to make sure that our board was connecting with the ownership. And let me tell you, it's really, really a challenge to make sure that students both know and, frankly, care what it is that happens behind closed doors with the union. That's what makes the job of president a little broader in that sense, and a little more practical in that because we are directly accountable to both the board and the ownership of the organization. And it's far easier for us students to understand what it is the president does. It makes my channels for communication with the Laurier students that much easier for them to connect with. I have the power of the marketing department of the union, the university affairs department, as well as an entire website and social media series at my fingertips, or at least at the marketing department's fingertips. And it's there that I've mentioned before in these talks, Aaron, that I'd like to really revamp what it is that we present to the Laurier community. Celebrating the successes of clubs and associations that function under such challenging circumstances this year, Aaron, is going to be instrumental in boosting student satisfaction and an awareness that the Laurier community is not dead this year, that there is so much going on that clubs and associations can be traced back to, and that we have to thank them for sustaining amidst such challenges. I've mentioned it before, Aaron, but it comes down to actionable items if we want to make sure that students, the ownership of the organization, know what it is we're doing. And I've mentioned a clear set of actionable items that I'd like to implement to deliver that accountability. The website revamp, making the presentation much more streamlined is just one example. But revamping Tariq's Plummer's old system of communication is going to do wonders to make sure that the ownership clearly understands what we are doing every step of the way in my presidency. Those monthly update reports and the checklist graphic alongside my campaign promises are just small pieces of the bigger puzzle. And by the end of my presidency, I'd like to make sure that students have understood clearly what I've accomplished within 12 months.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for your answer. And Pegah, the same question to you. What is your plan to engage with the Laurier ownership and connect with students either directly or indirectly?
Look, so it's just about being held accountable to me. And I think that that's what they do a great job in doing. And I think that the board of directors in itself has, I think, done a great job so far. And I hope that we can keep that relationship. I think one thing that I do understand is the anonymity, the autonomy, of them and myself as if I were to be elected as president. Further, to make sure that I'm held accountable, I do think that we should be opening marketing and making sure that we are being as open to our strengths and sometimes even if need be, things that we've been just advocating for that we not necessarily have gotten 100% there yet, but things that we could just talk on the Instagram, on the Twitter, where students will be looking. And obviously that also comes down to the website. I think that the website is a great tool that those students who do check it out should be able to find every single piece of information there. I just think that Instagram and so on is a good way to just get the highlights out there. So making sure that, having those things being set out, may it be a monthly checklist as Joey has mentioned himself, or it be a weekly checklist or something like it doesn't, I think it just really matters that we're getting the information out there and that students are aware of what the SU is doing. So I think that's the best way that I could answer that question.
Thank you very much, candidates. As we had a debate last week that was a little bit more focused on the Waterloo campus, I'd like to ask a few questions that are, again, more targeted at the Brantford campus, as we did at last Thursday's open forum. So question for both candidates, how will you handle programming and services on the Brantford campus so that students feel included in Waterloo-based programming? We'll start with Joseph.
All right. As far as Brantford goes, Aaron, I mentioned at last week's open forum that I want to highlight and celebrate the successes of what Brantford volunteers and students are accomplishing within their means already, so that it justifies our the extended plans we have for investment in those programming and services and making those much more open so that Brantford isn't just that one little corner of Laurier that does their own thing. Now, part of my approach, Aaron, is inspired by my experience with the Department of Residence. When dons and resident staffers go for training before the year starts, they take a few days in a 2-week training system to go out to Brantford to visit the RCW, the SC Johnson building, and in particular, the Market Square building, now One Market. And based on the feedback from dons and REAs that I knew in my time, they said, like, why don't we get more opportunities to check out this campus, to see all these hidden nooks and crannies, and to know what it is that we're missing? Like last summer, we didn't even get to see the Brantford YMCA. And I, having taken a hard hat tour back then when I was a member of the Board of Governors, I thought that would be a great opportunity to show just how much life and energy can come into the Brantford campus in the future. The One Market expansion that's being planned is a great way to highlight that, especially with the Community Innovation Hub, the podcasting studios, the photo studios, all these opportunities for tailored experiential learning opportunities for Brantford students are something that I think Waterloo students should be very aware of, so that it encourages them to realize that there's not just all this fun to be had in Waterloo, that there is so much going on in Brantford, and that if we're justified in this approach, we should have every right and opportunity to invest so much more to highlight just how much Brantford could improve with so much more opportunities and so many better ways for Waterloo and Brantford students to mingle. Obviously, infrastructure makes things pretty difficult as far as getting Waterloo students and Brantford students to mingle back and forth. And I'm not going to go as far as advocating a direct bus line. It's a false hope, promise again. But knowing that the residence department year after year arranges opportunities for Waterloo students to visit Brantford and vice versa, I see absolutely no reason why Brantford students and Waterloo students should miss out on those opportunities, especially in the volunteer sphere. Breakers, 80 members, food bank volunteers, eco-hawks, all the volunteers under our sphere should have the opportunity to see exactly what Brantford has to offer and celebrate its successes, just as my team intends to do.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And the same question to Pega. How will you handle programming and services on the Brantford campus so that students feel included?
Yeah, so I think that that's kind of been the theme of all this, if they feel included in the Waterloo campus. But I think overall, we're all Laurier students. So I think making sure that they have the best experience possible in itself, not necessarily just as the Waterloo, so like being a part of Waterloo, just in itself, because, you know, we do have small bits and pieces, like we want to build this melting campus. And I think overall what we need to do is making sure that programming and services are available to all. And I think that Joey kind of touched upon it himself. Yes, we do want to advocate for a line between Brantford and Waterloo. That's just because we've heard so much about it and so many students have consistently told us that they want that. That being said, we are just petitioning the GoBus service to just audit the ability to do so. That being said, that's just how far we're willing to go, because I know that that's something that's constantly brought up, and there's no harm in representing the students' wants and needs. That being said, we also understand that it's a huge commuter school. So we need to also take into consideration that the demographic might be different than all students here at the Laurier Waterloo campus. I also think that, yes, there is a demographic of students in residence who might not feel that they get the complete programming here. But I think because of COVID, we can take it as an opportunity to really utilize online learning and make that into working alongside them in an online environment. Further, I think that yes, there is some things like COVID does suck. Like that's not even a lie, like that it does suck. But I think we do need to consider that students there have different needs potentially in some areas, and we need to sit down, talk with them. As Joey did mention, we do need to sit down, talk to them, see what they need, what they want. They have a different demographic of students. Most of the time, they do have a more mature student body. So really seeing what their needs are and how we can best give them a class schedule that falls into their needs. So yet again, that's just what I'm suggesting, and that's what I'll be advocating for, and that's what I'll be sitting down and talking to them if I am elected about.
Thank you very much, candidates. Now, some questions for specific candidates, and we'll start with Joseph this time. In last week's debate, there were several people who expressed some concerns about the timing of when you released your full campaign platform and social media strategy. I wanted to try to synthesize it into a question so that you might be able to address those collective concerns and maybe give a reason as to your motivations behind them a little bit more clearly. So because you released your full campaign platform and announced your social media campaign for president in the last week, which is 1 week later than Pega released hers, and especially during a year where online and social media, as well as communication with the Laurier ownership, is deemed to be more important now than ever, this move can either be regarded as unprepared, a reaction to your opponent's strategy, or as intentionally giving your opponent less time to evaluate your campaign than you have been given, i.e. for the purposes of debate. This was something that a few people have mentioned, a few people have expressed, so it isn't something that is just conjured out of thin air. How would you respond to those criticisms specifically and reassure the student body that your level of communication does not reflect that move or those concerns? And I will give you 3 minutes to respond to this question.
Certainly. Right. Very broadly addressing the question, I think I can answer it with a question of my own to everyone who's asked about that concern, about whether or not it shows unpreparedness on my part or simply trying to sabotage my opponent, which runs counter to the spirit of a professional election, by the way. So here's my question to those folks who've posed those concerns before. Do you play poker? And if so, how might you deal with a situation where you were dealt 4 aces on your first hand and were pretty sure that your hand could beat everyone else around the table? Would you immediately lay your cards down on the first round or wait till see who boosted the ante a little more? Let the game go on a little bit. Raise the stakes, build suspense, keep interest afloat. Would you lay it all on the table in the first hand? Or would you wait to sustain interest, wait for followers and passers-by to see what's going on and to engage with what you are doing, to see what a high-stakes game this is? That is the reason for the unorthodox strategy. It's an unorthodox year, Aaron, and conventional strategies over past elections just have not shown the increasing returns to scale in voter turnout. Last year was more evident than ever. Both candidates came strong right out the gate, laid all their cards on the table in the first round, and sure enough, only 6% of eligible students demonstrated a continued interest in the campaign. Mine's been unorthodox because I aim to make sure that the information is always relevant, that there's always a reason to keep tuning in over the last couple of weeks. It's different. And certainly it can be construed as cryptic or suspenseful. But in a year when we've seen decreasing returns to scale, and where, as you've mentioned, social media is now more important than ever, surely a different strategy merits returns to scale. If you need further proof of the fact that previous strategies are not working as far as engagement goes with the student union, I implore all of you, look at the participant count of this debate right now, 26 people. Count the number of those people who are already members of student publications, who are here out of obligation to host the debate. How many of them are student union executives? How many of them are members of a campaign team who already know who they're voting for before this has taken place? And we'll see exactly how engagement for this year turns out. I'm changing the rules of the game because this year, the rules need to be changed. The old rules just aren't working. A new strategy needs to be done. I'm all of the innovation to bring that to the table.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for your extremely thorough response to that question. For anybody who is going to be joining us tonight and submitting questions, I'm just letting you know now, I will not be addressing any more questions related to this topic as Joseph has spoken on it several times at this point. So I hope that is sufficient for everyone. Question now for Pega. Your platform identifies mental health and wellness as significant issues that you would like to address as president. What specific actionable goals and strategies do you have planned that would be aimed at either improving access or awareness to mental health and wellness tools and resources, or how these issues are overall treated at the university? So specific actionable goals and strategies do you have planned?
Okay, so I think if I could reiterate what I think your question is, you want me to just discuss how I think how these goals can be put into fruition. Is that okay? So basically, I think that my goals have been pretty clear, but if I could speak more to them, there's been so much that I've wanted to add since I've published it, but I can't. So what I will say is, we obviously want a web bot. We want to be able to go into class and just talk to students and make sure that students are well aware of what resources we already have available. I think that could be through my learning space, having it even though it's already highlighted, having it better, having it highlighted even more, having someone from wellness, mental health nurse come in and just sit down and tell all the students, you know, for 20 minutes or 10 minutes, however long, what resources there are and how to tell if your mental health might be struggling, and how to also recognize it in other people would be really helpful. And I don't think that it should be limited to just one age group, or one student body year. So it should be year 1 through 4. Further, I think that, what else do I want? I think there's just so much. I want to work alongside groups such as BetterHelp or corporations and businesses like that to make sure that students can also get online resources, because we've seen that a lot of my friends have told me they like that in therapy, they're able to first text, because we are a generation that has been, you know, behind a screen texting and then building up to just face-to-face or Zoom calls. That was something that was really brought up. I think there's also just so many other tangible things that we can do to make sure students are feeling safe and mentally healthy. Like, you know, it was brought up to me by actually Daniel here, who said something so simple. We could have gender neutral bathrooms, something that I feel like we do have, but we don't have them marketed well enough. So those are all simple things that we can bring into fruition. We can talk to students about and make sure that they're well aware of what we already have available. So I think those are all small things that I can do, but I could go on for hours on what I want to do. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Pega. Another question for Joseph. Several times during the campaign period overall and in your official campaign platform, you have been referring to former President Tariq Plummer, how his presidency has inspired you and how you want to carry on his legacy. So this would be a good opportunity just to kind of sum up a number of the things that you have referenced over this period. What elements or aspects of his presidency are you looking to incorporate into your own? And are you worried or concerned at all about appearing derivative in doing so?
Thanks, Aaron. I'm going to start from the backwards front, because I feel like that question, above all else, really weighs heavily on people's minds when I talk about the big impact Tariq's had on me personally. Am I just a carbon copy? Am I just Tariq 2.0? The answer to that is no, first of all. I am my own man. I'm looking for good leadership and new faces, just as Tariq did during his own year, to challenge the perception of exclusivity that the union had perpetuated for a while before he entered office. And so certain values of mine certainly loom large and were guided by Tariq's approach. But if you're talking about actionable items, and am I just recycling what Tariq did before? Absolutely not. When I was doing research to develop my platform, I carefully looked into those actionable items, the step-by-step processes that Tariq has done to deliver his goals. And in particular, as I've mentioned before, that monthly checklist of things that he could tick off that he accomplished month by month. And by the end of his term, there were some major promises that were left unchecked. And I have to applaud that honesty in the fact that he was readily willing at the end of his term to acknowledge that he could not achieve everything he set out to accomplish. Even if it was unfeasible, he acknowledged that there were certain things he couldn't deliver. And that's where I want to step in. By picking up the pieces and bearing upon his legacy while delivering my own custom approach to leadership, I want to look back over what couldn't get done during his time, understand where the outliers stood and what exactly it was that meant that his promises couldn't get done, refine the steps into actionable items and feasible ones that could get done. Greek life integration is a big one that stood out as something that Tariq was just unable to accomplish. It was left as an unchecked item after Tariq's 12 months. And after understanding the process that he went through, it was the same story told over again. He got elected into office promising integration and to put Greek life onto student CCRs. And sure enough, day one, Dave McMurray said, no, it's not going to happen, Tariq. Find a different promise. That's where I've developed a tailored approach for each Greek group that wants to get involved with the union, knowing that there are those that would rather go their own way. It respects their autonomy and it offers opportunities that respect the internal cultures of each Greek group. A one-size-fits-all approach just won't work for Greek life. Alpha Phi is very different from Alpha Omega. One's domestic, the other is international, just to start. Sigma Chi, very different from Pike and Zeta Psi and the other frats. There's so much difference in all these, and amidst changing circumstances, amidst a campus-wide lockdown, and knowing that we have a new face of the Student Affairs Department, Dr. Ivan Joseph, who's keen to understand the cultures of all these different groups and associations at Laurier, this offers a new and clean slate for Greek groups among so many other groups to get that chance to get in good with the union that they deserve. That is what Tariq couldn't accomplish during his year. That is the example I aim to embody. It's one example, but it demonstrates that I'm very much my own man. And while Tariq's legacy does live large in my heart, I recognize that he wasn't a flawless leader. There were things that he just could not deliver. And that's what I want to solidify with my term.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for another thorough answer. Question next for Pega, and I just want to confirm, Pega, so I don't ask a stupid question. You have not sat on the board of directors previously, correct? No, okay, good. Just confirming, wanted to double check. So because you have experience with both the Board of Governors and the Senate, because you have sat in both, you lack experience, however, sitting on the Board of Directors. How do you plan to overcome that lack of experience serving on the Board of Directors in order to act as a resource, guide, and source of confidence for other directors, especially the new group that will be incoming?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I have not sat on the board of directors, and I actually can see that as a bit of a strength. And I can go into that a little more later, but I think yet again, one thing that I do want to make sure that the board of directors is aware, like obviously they're autonomous from myself. So I'm not really supposed to be in complete contact with all of them. So yet again, I think that that's a great way that I could, because of my I haven't been put in that position before. You don't have to worry about that. But that being said, I know that during the transitional period, there's a lot of great different bodies in both the board of directors currently and also on the students union as VP roles who are able to help in those situations. So I don't think that that's anything to be really concerned about for the board of directors themselves, especially if there is a new body who I'm sure there are some who have had some experience in it prior to this coming year.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank candidates. You guys have been doing great so far. We are about 45 minutes into tonight's event. So I do want to keep in our minds the time. So I think we are going to move into the debate portion of tonight's event. And I want to start off by giving candidates the opportunity to ask each other questions that you may have prepared in advance, or questions about each other's platforms that you would like to know more about, or critique, debate, that kind of thing. So I will give the floor to either candidate who has a question for the other person that they would like them to ask or answer.
I'm happy to let Pega take a question first. If you want to get rolling, otherwise I've got some questions I can ask Pega. I don't mind.
Yeah, so I'll just start with just a quick question because my team and I were a little, we just wanted to know. So you have a mental health initiative, but you don't seem to address mental health within it. You just want, from my understanding of your policy in your platform, you want to create or help create this new building. That being said, that would take years to make, and it would not be seen by many students who are currently a part of the Students' Union. So what's your plan B to help current students?
So just as a reminder, as we move into this section, the candidate who asks the question, or sorry, the candidate who answers the question, they will have a chance to rebut the question, and then the candidate who has the question will have a chance to do like a rebuttal of sorts, and then allow the candidate answering to do a final rebuttal. So there'll be a bit of a back and forth for each question allowed. Oh, unmute yourself, Joey. Thank you.
That's good. All right, excellent. Right, thanks for picking up on that, Pega. I see you did read the platform carefully, because I did mention in there that it's very likely that students will not see an immediate benefit from the idea of renovation and expanding the physical capacity of the wellness services. I've made that very, very clear, as Dave McMurray did to me when we discussed the plan back in fall. But the idea of long-term initiative to help students, we justified and offset the short-term costs and the pinch that we face at this time. While short-term goals certainly loom large in my legacy and will come to define how I take over the lockdown crisis and the lack of confidence that a lot of students have in the union, and how that's impacting their mental health at the moment with remote learning and all the challenges that come with being away from the campus that we love. I am dedicated to not only short-term solutions, but long-term ones. Stopgap measures aren't really the kind of solutions that I believe and that Dave McMurray believed from the Student Affairs Department with that experience would be beneficial for students' long-term mental health. And that's why we aimed to develop a platform promise, an actionable item mind, and a step-by-step process on how the union can support it that ensures that students down the line will have had the groundwork laid in my year to enjoy far increased capacities than they currently did when campus was open to mental wellness services. While this year's students may not immediately benefit from renovation, knowing that the renovations are effectively already on the horizon, in that Alumni Field is already being renovated as we speak to accommodate the development of a new building. Knowing that these plans are already in place, the union's support for these buildings and the long-term mental health benefits that they promise will far outweigh the short-term pinch of subsidized costs, as we will be able to boast among Ontario universities that our approach to mental health directly addresses the lack of capacity that has hindered students. As the conversation around mental health is destigmatized and progress is made on that front, more and more students have come to request services that they just can't get in a timely way. They've had to wait weeks or even months for counseling sessions that they need as soon as possible. So this long-term goal, while I admit it may take a process of years to accomplish, will ensure that our Laurier Golden Hawks down the line will by far be able to benefit from a short-term pinch and be able to boast of a campus that cares about their mental health and has put in actionable items to deliver upon their needs. Tomorrow's students will thank us for the changes we make under my presidency.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Pega, do you have a follow-up to that you would like more information on, or any sort of a rebuttal?
Yeah, so I'm on the Board of Governors, and that is, from what I can tell you, $1 million project. And I think that it is very, very, it is very much a great idea. And I could not tell you I don't support it, because I definitely do. But it definitely alienates the Brantford campus, and it is in no way, shape, or form, I think, representative of their needs. And it doesn't really, in my opinion, it doesn't really show what the students need at the moment, the ones who are suffering in a pandemic. Furthermore, I think that it might not be completely actionable, and I'm a little concerned that if you are successful in being elected, that you might not be able, that if that's not the case and you are not able to present that, then you might not have a plan B. So I definitely urge you that if you are successful in being elected, to please just take my platform and take my mental health goals.
Thank you very much, Pega, for the interesting follow-up. Joseph, do you have a response to that?
Just a very brief one, Aaron. You bring up a very good point, Pega. Certainly, it's not made explicitly clear within the context of the platform what benefits will be made for the Brantford campus. But remembering my own time on the Board of Governors, Pega, I think I would have expected you to perhaps remember that the planned expansions to the One Market space in Brantford, as well as the community innovation hubs, will provide increased capacities for mental wellness services over in Brantford. So while it's not within my mandate to make unfeasible promises for student wellness, I don't include it and mention it specifically because those plans for increased capacity in Brentford are already underway and not within the mandate of the student union to involve themselves anymore. Certainly, we can provide strategic guidance as to the kinds of wellness services that may be provided and that students may benefit from, but the innovation has already been put in place. That said, Pega, I do want to make sure that, you know, by no means do I think my approach is leagues better than yours. I think you have done a significant amount of research on this, and I do have to applaud both the short-term vision that you have for student benefits and the fact that it is an empathetic cause. And know, Pega, that I'm very happy to work with you and adopt some of the strategies that you have in place to accompany my actionable approach, because your strategy is excellent, Pega. I do have to acknowledge that. While I'm more focused on on-the-ground solutions, your strategic vision, I think, would be excellent as a potential contribution to my presidency. And I'd be more than happy to have you in consultation with me as we work to develop a good solution for undergrads.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Now, Joseph, I will allow you to ask a question for Pega next. And then we'll have the same question answered.
Sure. So, Pega, I understand that you've acknowledged, quite rightly so, that the lack of board of directors experience may in some ways hinder you. I thought it was a bit unusual that you said it may be an asset for you, and I'm keen to see how you justify that. But my immediate question for now, at least, is that come April 30th, the day before you're set to start your term as president, should you be elected, you'll be expected to have drafted a budget for the incoming board of directors to approve for all programming and services and operating activities that the union has to deal with. Working on a $10 million budget and knowing how to allocate the right figures and the right resources to each appropriate department of the union. Creating a budget is no small task. And do you feel then that your experience or lack thereof are going to prepare you in a very short time to draft an entire operating budget for a $10 million organization?
Thank you for the question, Joseph. And Pega, your response?
Yeah, so just to speak on how I find that it could be a bit of an asset to not have been on the board of directors is because we are two autonomous bodies. Yes, they are there to keep me in check if I were to be elected and so on. However, that being said, I think that I have worked alongside Devin in building and just working alongside her in just meeting with her, asking her questions, as well as Phil and anyone else in administration that I could really get a hold of during this period to make sure that everything that I had said was feasible and that if it came down to it, that we'd be able to budget it all within prior to coming into office. That being said, I do understand that, yes, I have not had a chance to sit at the board of directors, but I have had a chance to sit at the board of governors, which is strictly financial in the sense of administration. So we do work with million-dollar projects. So I think that I do understand very well how to budget and very well how finances are able to be allocated and how to best budget the students' union finances. I think that, yet again, it is very likely that I will be able to do a very good and successful job, and I will definitely be working alongside Devin in creating that budget if I should be elected.
Thank you for the response, Pega. And Joseph, do you have any follow-up to that question?
Yeah, and just a quick one. Like, certainly I know from 2 years of experience, Pega, that certainly board of governors experience can be an asset to understand financial management. But I'd like to know how your particular involvement on 30-person board whose experience in the professional workspace might have affected your own vision for creating that budget. If there are particular committees you joined that would have given you that experience. And aside my own experience, I was chair of the finance committee when I served on the board of directors. It was my job to dictate exactly how much President Kanwar Brar in his time was compliant with both the budget that he had set out for his board and was following along with both the Constitution and policy manual amendments, specifically catered to financial services and open accountability. I've got the experience both on that committee, chairing the finance, and I'm an accountant by trade. I've got the hands-on experience to draft the budget. So what is it about your board experience that gives you the necessary experience to draft something that monumental?
To again address this question, I think that my experience on the board of governors on the HR committee has given me some insights on how to frame finances. I definitely understand your concerns, but that being said, I have sat down with different administrative bodies to make sure that all of my ideas are feasible. I'm not really saying that we build a new building or that we create a juice bar in the AC. I think that those are all great ideas, but yet again, I think that all of my policies are all things that we can definitely advocate for and are not as costly. That being said, I yet again think that consultation is the biggest thing that I can do. It doesn't even matter if I have experience in finance or not. Yet again, I have to work alongside the groups that are stakeholders in this. So I am here as a figurehead, as a spokesperson for these groups, and I have to make sure that I'm consulting them as best as possible. So I'm not going to be creating a budget, no matter how well of my understanding of finance, without talking to these groups first.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for the question, and Pega for the response. Pega, you now have the opportunity to ask Joseph another question if you would like.
Yeah, so he was mentioning vulnerable sector checks, and I'm just a little confused as to why you think that that's something that the students' union should really be held accountable for. I'm currently sitting on a hiring body right now, and I think that that's very much something in administration's role, unless you're suggesting that students themselves be subject to these vulnerable sector checks. And in that case, I want to understand why.
All right, Pega. So I think in phrasing this question, I worry that you may be looking at it from the wrong angle. My offer to incentivize vulnerable sector checks is not an obligation for any and all students that want to get involved with the union. It's something they already have to do. It was in union policy to ensure that all volunteers who wanted to work with the union got those checks before they started their term of work. So it's not so much that I'm mandating that they get the checks, it's that I want to increase the accessibility of those services in helping bring them just a little bit closer to campus, right? This is based on both my own experience as well as that of certain dons that I worked with and volunteers who had to drive a pretty long way into Waterloo or even Kitchener to get and buy vulnerable sector checks from police stations. It's a hassle to go out of your way for that kind of service that could easily be brought a little bit closer to campus just for better accessibility. That's what I'm talking about. It's about an actionable item. Accessibility isn't just a strategic vision for me, Pega. It's about actionable items. I'm not just about making things more accessible. I'm about literally bringing them closer to campus so that it's less of a hassle for students. That's why I put the vulnerable sector checks there. Not as a forced mandate that we entirely need for students, but just making a slight administrative hassle that they already have to go through just a little bit easier for them.
Thank you, Joseph. Pega, do you have a follow-up to his response?
Yeah, so for example, I think you mentioned using third-body companies to do these vulnerable sector checks, but don't you think students might find that a little invasive versus going to a police station, which already has their records? I personally would not really want a third-body company to have that information, if that makes sense.
That's a fair point, Pega, and it raised the issue of privacy. And then to that, I would add that it's the student's choice where they choose to go to access a vulnerable sector check. If they feel comfortable enough accessing a certain third party that's licensed to run vulnerable sector checks, they are more than welcome to go to that service if it's a little closer to campus. That's on them. If they feel secure about it, that's fine. For those students that don't want third parties to have that information, that's fine too. They're more than able to go and access the services from licensed police services. Right? They still have that option, and they don't have to submit unwanted information to third parties. They're very right to scrutinize third parties. It's fair, and I understand it. But if we're going to increase accessibility, let's at least leave a door open for those students who are comfortable with that option. That's all I'm offering.
Thank you very much for the question and the responses. I think we'll do one or two more questions just so that we have time to do some audience submitted questions and then some live questions as well. Joseph, if you have a question for Pega, you can ask it next.
Thanks, Aaron. Pega, I think you cite your experience working through Greek life as one of the highlights of your Laurier experience, and a great opportunity for you to have gotten leadership skills and networked efficiently. Greek life experience is fantastic, but as I mentioned a little earlier in the debate, I think you should know more than me personally, who has no Greek life experience, but has talked to people from each fraternity and sorority, that the internal cultures of each of these groups are very different. In that respect, why is your Greek life integration initiative and your particular stance on getting them involved with the union set out in kind of a one-size-fits-all approach that has been proven not to work for other presidential candidates that get shut down right out the gate? Why not have a tailored approach for each Greek group?
I like the question, but if you read through my platform, you'd know that in no way, shape, or form do I say that it's one size tailored approach. I've actually mentioned that I would advocate for those who want it, because yet again, I'm well aware that Sigma Chi, who does tend to be a little more academic than, let's say, Pike, does want more availability to clubs and associations than, let's say, Pike, because, you know, policies and so on, holding them accountable to the university. I think that if you had read through it, you would understand that I did not at all say that, and I stick by that. If a group does want it, I am more than happy to advocate for it with administration, but I have not stated that I would do the same thing for all of them. That being said, being a member of Greek life, I know that we all have great philanthropy, and I don't think that anyone would not want to have that marketed to the student body. So if we do have open events, which are events that are open to all students and anyone within the community to help the community in itself, I don't see why anyone would oppose that to be advocated on the SU calendar.
Any follow-up, Joseph?
My only response would just be to bear in mind, Pega, the responses of the Student Affairs Department, who have consistently swept away the opportunities for past presidential candidates who are elected and make very similar promises as you've presented from day one of their presidencies to provide these groups with their opportunities. It happened during the presidency of Zamar Hakim, and so, Sigma Chi in particular had a really bad experience where they were expecting to have a budget and a certain space provided to them for the Get Involved fair by the union, and suddenly the rug swept out from under them at the last minute with no communication. False promises like that really do not help develop trust between these groups and the union. So I hope if you're elected that you're able to deliver upon this promise and work with the university staff to accommodate the needs of each of those groups.
Any final comments on his response?
Yeah, and Joey, I hope so too. That being said, I have been a member of Greek Life, and I know exactly how much great work we have done for the community, especially Grand River. So I don't really hope to make any false promises, as I've had a stake in it myself. So I think that's all I can really say to that.
Thank you very much. Pega, you may ask another question for Joseph if you have it.
Yeah, so I've I myself have been the head bartender of a very great steakhouse down in Toronto, and I've done the Smart Serve. And you mentioned in your platform that Smart Serve was something that you found could help educate students on the risks of drinking and drinking responsibly. It's an $80 course, so it's not exactly inexpensive. And from my time in taking that course, I recognized that it was a lot about legal liability and making sure that whoever my customers were being safe and secure. It wasn't so much about the long-term effects of alcohol on their body or in their personal lives. So could you speak more as to why you thought that that was the best alternative to making sure students were educated?
Interesting. Joseph, your response?
Sure. Educating students about overindulgence in alcohol isn't the primary intention of the Smart Serve initiative, Pega. It's more of an ancillary tack-on effect. It's a potential benefit, and I'm not touting it as the main reason why I'm advocating for the Smart Serve policy. Again, it's about increased accessibility. Servers at Wills have to go through and get that training, and there are plenty of services in and around the Waterloo community, especially in our town, that hire a lot of student staff who also need that service and that qualification. So the main reason I push for making sure that students have a better way to get Smart Serve training, and it's incentivized, is to help them get those opportunities. It's about securing good employment, Pega. Potential education is just a secondary benefit, and what they take away from it is entirely up to them. It's subjective. If they experience more, if they receive more education about the long-term effects of alcohol overindulgence or consumption, then that's on them. If it's more about legal liabilities, it's great knowledge as well. And that's an excellent takeaway for them to have. In any case, the potential education benefits for those students that choose to get it is excellent in any form it takes. And it's a great secondary reason to justify my policy. The main reason, though, being making sure it's more accessible to the volunteers in the union who need it to work at our services.
Thank you very much. I can't remember. Pega, did I give you the opportunity to do a follow-up to that question? Would you like to?
Yeah, so I think if we're talking about finances, which you did mention prior to, financially it is an expensive course. And then you also mentioned that you wanted to reimburse also standard first aid training. You know, here at Laurier, we do have some reimbursement, and we also do provide them at the AC. Also, someone who has been a lifeguard and a swim instructor, I've taken those courses. They're not cheap, and they're also very extensive. Do you think that that is really the best, that's the best way to reimburse it's the best to reimburse students? I understand volunteers, but employees in themselves, do you think that that's fiscally responsible and feasible?
And your response, Joseph?
I'm going to go back to one of the ends of the student union to explain why this is a good policy, Pega. And the policy manual states very clearly that one of the main reasons for the union's existence is to provide services and products that cater to students' financial needs. And that moreover, the costs of any projects the union provides will be justified by the benefits to students of those results. Now, I'm an accountant by trade, Pega. I understand that sometimes bootstrapping is a very good thing, right? I'm British, I'm frugal by nature, it's cultural. That said, I understand that certainly the union may not have the resources to fully reimburse or subsidize every person who comes through our gates looking for these services. And that's why my platform does mention a partial option to ensure that we are able to deliver on partial reimbursement at least, but to at least help ease students' financial burdens. With all the hassles of student life this year, adding on to their financial woes should not be another thing they have to contend with. Already, the effects on student satisfaction and student mental health have taken their toll. We've seen that in the claims rankings. And adding on to that, the stresses of trying to dig out money in your pocket to pay for Smart Serve training or vulnerable sex check or all these qualifications I'm offering. First aid, they shouldn't have to tag on to students additional stresses. That's where I want to lighten the load, and the union's own reason for existing justifies my approach. It's there to make sure students receive the benefits that they need to be successful, and the costs, the benefits outweigh the costs.
Candidates, thank you very much for the very thorough and well thought through questions and responses that you have each been providing so far. I want to make sure that we have time to go through all the audience questions, but obviously if we have some more time later, I'd like to get to some of your own questions more. I will give each of you one more question that you can ask for now before we move on into some audience submitted questions. So Joseph, if you have one more question you'd like to ask Pega for now, please ask it now.
Thanks, Aaron. Pega, a little earlier in tonight's discussion, you mentioned relaunching the Milton campus and starting to reinvest back in that a little bit. I'm not sure exactly what was discussed on the Board of Governors during your tenure there, but it was made very, very clear during my tenure that the university is going to continue exploring avenues for continued funding after the province pulled out of its funding mechanisms, but that with the COVID lockdown entering place, Milton was going to be put on the back shelf for a while until the student could deal with its immediate short-term results. Exactly what concrete progress do you expect to make for the union's involvement, at least, with Milton?
Thank you very much, Pega. Your response?
Yeah, so I didn't really breach confidentiality. I just wanted to let you know that that was something that was considered. And if we're talking about future endeavors, hopefully there will be a Milton campus. Currently, we do, I think, have some stuff in Toronto as well. So yet again, I was just being very clear that we shouldn't just have this figured to just the Waterloo campus, and we should not just have our student body be trying to be what the Waterloo has. We have to be very clear in the uniqueness of every campus that is current and in future generations. So that was just hypothetical, and I didn't want, I'm sorry if I misled anybody.
Joseph, any follow-up or rebuttal?
No, just to say I understand the need for confidentiality, Pega, and it's not emphasized especially strongly within your platform, so I wouldn't hold you up to it necessarily. But thanks for clearing that up.
Thank you very much. Pega, do you have a final question for Joseph for now?
You know, I think maybe I can come to it later, but I think for now he's answered my questions quite well.
Thank you very much, both of you. Now we are going to get into some questions that have been submitted to us, some questions that we didn't have the chance to get to last debate, and then we will make sure we leave plenty of time for any fresh audience questions now. The first question is for both candidates. We're going to do a few for both candidates. What do you think you have that the other candidate lacks, either in their platform or in their experience? We will start this time with Pega. Go ahead.
So I think that Joseph has done a very great job in making sure that he is well aware of all the different avenues. I think that I can't really speak to his experience on the Senate because yet again, I don't think many students have had that position, and I don't think that that's necessarily something that he needs to have for this job. But that being said, I think that there is a little bit of a concern in my group that his mental health initiatives and even his involvement with minority groups might be a little tone deaf. So that is something that I might bring up. Yet again, I think he has done a good job in trying to discuss it. And I can give him, I do congratulate him on that, and I do applaud him for it.
Thank you very much, Pega. And Joseph, the same question to you. What do you think did you have that the other candidate does not in regard to their platform or experience?
Aaron, I think it's a little unfair at this point to drill in my work with residents and the board of directors and several other faculty associations, Hawkabella even, that PEGA may not benefit from. It's a little unfair to keep beating that dead horse. But in the interest of fairness, I'm a little worried that part of that PEGA's administrative experience and involvement with the union, or lack thereof in any meaningful capacity, may hinder her transition, should she be elected over the next 3 months, to be in a position where she is ready to understand the needs of union volunteers and all our stakeholders in a very short period of time. That said, I do have to appreciate the work that she has done to represent a lot of underrepresented groups on campus, and certainly I have to acknowledge in that, as Peggy mentioned, that where my approach to a diversity and equity initiative may have seemed tone deaf to certain people, I have to acknowledge the limitations of my character. Not being from a recognized marginalized community, my perspectives are limited, but I would argue that that does capture part of the problem of the culture of exclusivity that students complain about within the union sphere. What I'm aiming to do is instead to challenge that culture by enabling students from those communities to have a voice, invested resources to make actionable changes. And certainly, I don't want to force students or impose them to share their experiences if they're not comfortable. It's about providing opportunities, Aaron and Pega. All I want to do is provide an open space and the opportunity to provide meaningful change, especially in a year when the university even has recognized the increased need for actionable items on EDI, anti-racism, anti-blackness, and a whole host of other issues that specifically limit the abilities of marginalized communities and communities of color on campus to fully enjoy and be satisfied in their experiences. That said, as far as Pega goes, her experience and the breadth of work she's done to represent those communities is excellent. Again, I just worry that the hands-on experience or lack thereof with the union and its policies may limit her ability to implement meaningful and actionable and realistic change.
Thank you very much, candidates. Now the next question for both of you, I realize you have all spoke to throughout the campaign period, throughout your platforms, but maybe if you want to speak more on it or maybe sort of summarize everything. One person is asking, I'm curious what your return to campus plans would be, especially with respect to first and second year students. So what are your plans for the event that we return to campus? We'll start with Pega.
Yeah, so this is very unprecedented. We've never had students leave and then come back. So that's definitely something that I think even if Joey or I were to be elected would be a challenge. But that being said, I think that we have come to realize that those going into second year have had a little bit of their experience stolen from them. And I do feel for them. And that being said, I think that we have and we will put aside funds for them to come into orientation week, be it either a week or, snow week if it's in the winter time, to have them also gain a meaningful experience alongside first years. First year programming, as I've mentioned, I want to do quite a bit of added programming to it in O week or have it be snow week. And I think that those are most of what I can say to having them oriented in the university. I also understand that we do have a large portion of our students who are mature students, especially at the Brantford campus. So I do want to take into consideration their needs as well, and to make sure that I am sitting down in May when I am, if I am elected, to make sure that I'm sitting down, talking to individuals in those areas and talking to the different demographics to make sure I have exactly what their needs are. And that would really be me working alongside the VP of programming exceptionally closely come the months leading up to September, and then yet again, leading up to January.
Thank you very much, Pega. And Joseph, the same question to you.
Right. So, Aaron, I think I, like everyone else, really just counting down the days until that bright sunny day when we will all get to return to the respective campus that we love, be it Waterloo or Brantford. To that end, I want to beat the dead horse again and emphasize my platform initiatives, solid, actionable items to ensure that first and second year students today who've missed out on one of the grandest, most formative experiences that the union has to offer over the entire Laurier experience will not be left out to dry next year. Those students who've missed out on what we call the proper Laurier O-Week experience this past fall, and those who may miss out on it again next fall, will have the opportunity when I'm president and after lockdown has ended to purchase tickets for expanded O-Week programming that will have specific programming and services and events catered to their particular needs. Sure, there'll be some events that are more focused for first years, that second and third years may not benefit from as much. But the most important thing, Aaron, is not to deprive, students from enjoying this experience simply because they had really bad timing in getting into university. It's not something that I think any student should be deprived of. It's something I want to get going and make sure that we have a contingency plan set out for that bright sunny day when the campus reopens. On top of that, I've mentioned a whole host of other actionable initiatives to make sure students know what they're going to have to look forward to when campus reopens. My expanded ideas for the PERS 2.0, the Nest, making sure that the range of programming and services that it offers to our children associations is much clearer to first years, making sure we're directly communicating with first years, be it in lectures, through the website, through Zoom Q&As, through that monthly checklist to make sure they know what is going on behind closed doors and what their president is doing. Those are all big parts of the post-lockdown practice and the strategy. And to that end, it's actually not something I've mentioned yet, but a big element of my platform that I did want to bring to light is my idea for international student integration. Something I mentioned at the start of this debate, but put very simplistically in the time I have left, I see a big brother or big sister program where we partner domestic students at Laurier with a willing international student, a young one just coming into Laurier, so that they can rely on a good friend right off the gate from day one, as soon as they come into Laurier, so that they are not left to fend for themselves amidst the academic and non-academic stresses of Laurier, as well as the cultural barriers they have to overcome. Knowing that they'll have a go-to friend who can help them navigate through those stresses is what a lot of international students that I've spoken to have said they could have benefited from in their first year at Laurier and in Canada. And that's something that I'd like to see really get going and have a chance to shine after the COVID lockdown has ended.
Thank you very much, candidates, for your responses. The next question that has been submitted, I will give a bit of context for. So Respond as Lockdown is a program that has been the source of a lot of anxiety, a lot of upset for a number of students. I'm sure you've all seen a lot of the angry comments on Spotted and other social media platforms about it. Now, with that being said, if you are elected, are you planning to do anything in response to these concerns? And if so, what is involved in that plan? So we'll start with Pega. What are you planning to do regarding Respond as Lockdown, if anything?
Yeah, so this year I've had a very great opportunity to work alongside the senators, student senators, and that is a little bit unorthodox actually, because usually student senators don't tend to meet, but I think Brandon, who's actually here, has helped us to really unite one another and to talk about it, because we were all pretty upset about all the influx of students on Spotted discussing it. So we've actually discussed it with administration ourselves. Obviously, this has come in such short notice that we weren't able to really successfully do it so far, but that's not something that we've necessarily put on the back burner. We're definitely still considering it in our time. We are here, most of us, for 2-year terms, so we are planning on, I think we are all well aware that we will be planning on talking about it within the coming years. And that being said, if I am given this position, that will only help advocate for it more. Devin has done a really great job so far in sitting down with the Senate in our meetings and discussing it as well. I think that being a student union elected leader gives a little bit more of a push towards it. And it was definitely something that gave us the chance to get the CRs this semester. You know, that was a good middle ground, I think. And so I think that's basically all I can really say for it now, but it's definitely not something that I haven't thought of.
Thank you very much, Pega. Joseph, the same question to you. What is your plan to address Respondus lockdown and the concerns associated with it?
All right. So first off, I do have to applaud the student senators of this past semester, including Pega, for the great work that they've put in. And largely, from my own experience in the governance process, undergrad representatives do get shut out a lot on these organizations because of our lack of worldly experience relative to faculty members and alumni. So I do have to applaud the work that has been done to tackle the implementation stresses of Respondus. That said, if it's been left largely to student senators to accommodate a system for test delivery that students can work with and that comply with academic regulations, then it concerns me a little bit that it's not been immensely clear to students what the union has done to advocate for those initiatives. So part of a big push on my end as leader of the university would be to pick up where the Senate has begun in their great work and carry on the conversations that Devin and our team have had, but also to ensure that a meaningfully improved resource is made available for students to take online tests without having to go through all those rigorous tests. Like I saw, just as I'm sure many people in the audience did, that spotted tweet where a student taking a first-year math exam had to memorize 4 pages worth of test-taking policy before actually writing the test. On top of all that theory they had to learn. It's baffling to me. So finding a good compromise that ensures that students don't have to remember all these rules and procedures for taking tests and delivering an effective and affordable way to take those tests too, like not having to go out and purchase mirrors or the fancy tripods or equipment that certain departments mandate, is a step in the right direction, and it's something that my administration really wants to narrow down on. We're all about financial accountability. And while I said that the costs of certain benefits are justified by the results, I'm very cognizant, as an accountant by trade, of exactly how much all these costs add up. And it's not right that students should be left on the lurch for equipment to take tests that cost this kind of amount. As far as Respondus goes, in particular, an expanded and clearer set of policies and procedures need to be put in place so that students don't have to go through all these hassles of knowing what rules and procedures to follow as they write a test. All they should have to worry about is the actual theory.
Thank you very much, candidates, for your responses. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to let you know that we have about an hour left in tonight's event. So I will do my best to make sure we are addressing all of these questions that we have. I really appreciate it. Let me again say that I appreciate the candidates for coming to tonight's events and giving the answers and the questions that they have been giving. You guys have been doing wonderful, and it is almost over. So let us get through the last little bit of this. We have another submitted question for both candidates, and this has to do with applicants and the students union. So do either of you have a plan to increase the amount of applicants for students union positions? I would assume this would relate to things such as icebreakers, because I know some of you have discussed points related to that in your platforms. So plans to increase the amount of applicants for student union positions, or in the event that there are fewer than expected, your plan to adapt to that situation. So we'll start with Pega.
Yeah, so within, I believe, the strategic plan for the 2020-2025 year that the SU put out, they did highlight volunteer recruitment and retention. So I think that working alongside that framework would be a great start. That being said, I think that one of the biggest things is to make sure students are aware that what the SU is. So I think that really goes back to when I did mention that I think that it is a strength for me to not have had that necessarily experience in the board of directors in the SU. That's I think because I wasn't really given that opportunity. And I think that because I didn't really understand it from the very beginning. So I think having students have a good understanding of what is available, what volunteer opportunities and what employment in the SU is available, and also just how the framework of the SU works, could be a very meaningful change. If that is implemented in O-week programming, or if Dons are able to express that throughout their tenure and in Locus, for example, that would be something that I think we should definitely look into, so that it doesn't necessarily become too, let's say, like cliquey, that we've had a lot of students mention in the past. So I think that's my way of mentioning it and discussing it and highlighting it, but I'm open to hearing any other feedback.
Thank you very much, Pega. And Joseph, same question to you. Do you have a plan to increase the amount of applicants for student union positions, and a plan in the event that there are fewer than expected?
So certainly the short answer to the question, Aaron, is yes, I intend to massively boost the availability of volunteers next year, especially breakers, considering the ambitious contingency plan I want to set up for a renewed and revolutionized O-week experience. Now, understanding that this year we've had a lot of challenges with student engagement, largely because of the online medium and the fact that students didn't have that full O-week experience to know and have the incentive to be breakers next year, that's going to be a challenge that we have to accommodate. And I'm pragmatic. Above all, I'm optimistic. I'm a Christian, but I'm still realistic in recognizing that it's entirely possible students just will not tune in. That said, knowing the limitations of student engagement this year, that is where I've done my best over the course of this campaign, and will continue to do so over the months preceding next year, to really, really push for first year's involvement in the student union sphere of involvement. Now, I've talked about actionable items we can do to achieve that before. I've talked about lecture circuits. I've talked about opportunities for first years and second years now, younger students, to see the face of the leadership in person, and to not be talked to from behind a screen, behind a veil, wherein they just kind of read a monthly update, pretty blanket towards all of them. To know that your president wants to talk to you directly and to hear from you. I'm sure that would have made the difference to tons of first-year students in years past, had they seen that in their own time. Over my 6 years now at Laurier, I never saw a president come out to lectures, and I know that they will offer to have candidates and presidents speak for a short time in certain lectures. To come out to those lectures and show themselves, show the leadership of the organization, to dispel the idea that it's just a faceless clique. What I want to do is to speak to these students directly, to let them know that their president is a real guy and who wants to get their involvement, to see all of them, to meet new names, get new faces and ideas on board, empowering first-year students and those unrepresented communities within what can be seen as an exclusive culture of the union. It's going to be a big hurdle for us to challenge, Aaron. It's once pervaded the union for a long, long time. But by implementing that face-to-face leadership that the union sorely needs, that's going to be our turnaround. That's how we're going to be, we are going to engage first years and younger students next year. Face-to-face leadership.
Thank you very much, candidates, for your responses. The next question for both candidates: what is something about your opponent's platform that you like and might consider incorporating into your own presidency if you are elected? And what is something about your opponent's platform that you would encourage them not to pursue if they are elected? So something you like about theirs that you might incorporate into your own, something about theirs that you don't like that you might discourage them from seeing to fruition, or a suggestion to alter it otherwise. We'll start with Pega.
I think that his monthly, the monthly checklist and having that is a great idea. And I don't know, yet again, I've mentioned, I don't know if I would necessarily have it as monthly, just to be realistic as to how busy one is, and also like just making sure that like we're communicating everything. So if it's like small things once a week, but in some format to do so. Yet again, I think that I have mentioned mental health has been something that I really hope that if he is elected, he will take from my platform, and he's been pretty open to it. So I do applaud him for that, but I would hopefully have him consider it further. On top of that, potentially just the wording of his equity area, just in respects to students who do come from China, maybe making it more inclusive, and also making sure that you're not having them considered a minority group. Not to say that some students aren't, but to have them be checking off that they're considered a minority along just for being an international student could be a little bit of an issue. So if you would potentially consider that, that's all that I can say. But yet again, I think the monthly checklists and his experience with Tariq are all great things that I really do hope that if I am elected, I could take into action.
Thank you very much, Pega. And Joseph, the same question to you. What's something about your opponent's platform that you like and might incorporate into your own presidency, and something about your opponent's platform that you do not like and have some suggestions about and or might encourage them not to pursue entirely?
Right. This answer might be a bit of a cop-out, given Peg has already mentioned the mental health initiatives, but again, I have to applaud her commitment to short-term investments in helping students navigate the challenges of mental health issues and remote learning challenges next year. The short-term vision is excellent, and while I have done more to emphasize long-term goals for the union, certainly I respect the need for short-term vision and setting out good goals. So I'm hoping with my proclivity for actionable items, I'll be able to adapt the short-term Pega has for those mental health initiatives into my administration. And I would certainly be happy to consult with Pega personally under my presidency to make sure that it's accomplished and that the fruits of her research into this don't go to waste. That said, there are some elements of the platform that I do take issue with. While the details are a little sketchy, I think a lot of Pega's intentions are very, very admirable, and certainly the strategic vision is good. I was a little concerned about the action plans for certain items or lack thereof, but one of the big ones that I want to just urge Pega to be careful with emphasizing is her plan for Brentford integration, particularly the idea of better integrated transportation. We've mentioned it before, but the wording of your policy sounds almost synonymous with ideas that presidential candidates have tossed around for years, and they don't get past the municipal level and they don't get past the provincial level when we talk with those policymakers. So my concern, Pega, would not be that your ideas are wrong-minded. I certainly think it would be great to have that direct line. I just worry about the feasibility, and I don't want Bradford students to be given that kind of false hope and to hear the same hollow promises that they've heard time and time again from candidates. Look for a more realistic implementation plan with the Bradford integration, and I'd be more than happy to help you out in that regard if you're looking for feasible alternatives. But I'd urge you just to be careful about giving Bradford students false hope.
Thank you very much, candidates. Now I'm going to take some time to address some of the questions that have been sent in the audience tonight. So we'll switch it up and we'll start this time with Joseph and then go to Pega. So question for both candidates, did you consult the current student executives or full-time staff of the Students' Union? And if so, who? And what did you learn from them in doing so? Joseph, you may start.
In the interest of open honesty, Aaron, I have not consulted with this year's professional staff. Now, part of that, in the interest of relative honesty, I do not want to stir the pot or make insinuations about backroom drama, but myself and certain members of the executive team have difficult working histories. So that made the opportunities for meaningful research very difficult on my end. My alternative solution to that was to work with current directors of the board who I've worked with very well in the past and who are sympathetic to some of the ideas I've mentioned. Not necessarily to the candidacy, they have to be neutral, but to the ideas, to understand what has been going on this year and how to create a tailored approach that will challenge next year's issues, to understand what previous administrations and I could have to look forward to for professional development. I did extensive research by hosting interviews with a lot of previous presidents. It goes without saying that a lot of my ideas borrow from Tariq's legacy. He and I have talked plenty about how a good president should govern his administration and create a good team and comply with policies. I've also spoken with President Brahe before him, President Olivia Matthews, President Tyler Van Hertzel, Annie Constantinescu from 2013, and I don't know if anyone's going to remember the name Michael Onabolu from all the way back in 2012. But I did an extensive list of research from past presidents to get that well-rounded experience of what has remained constant through roughly 8 years of presidential terms, to understand what I can expect, setting aside this year's challenges, to bring on board. Knowing what past presidents have had to do without their particular year's challenges is going to be crucial in understanding how to effectively transition. And so I'm not against communicating with Devin and her team should I win. I just recognized in researching for this campaign, I did not feel I would get meaningful information from that communication. And so that limited my outreach significantly. But I've made up for it in spades by speaking with those past presidents, understanding the issues of their time and how the role of the president has evolved to where it is right now.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Peggy, the same question to you. Did you consult any of the current student executives or full-time staff of the Students' Union in running for this position? And if so, what did you learn from them?
Yeah, so I mean, I could go through a list of everyone, and it was just, there were so many people that I got a chance to talk to, and they were also great to have a chat with, and they were all very interested in talking to myself and my team. So I think I could tell you about like everyone that I've talked to outside of them, but then I could go on for hours. But to speak to who I spoke to currently, I talked to Phil, Devin, currently the Dean of Students. I've spoken with, obviously, like as a student senator, I do have that connection with a lot of different senators, and many of whom have had either a role on the board of directors and so on. But I have also been very careful. With that being said, I have had some students, and obviously like it's just because of, you know, the time period that we're in, who have been considering positions or who have had positions on board of directors. And, you know, I have to also make sure that we're making sure that we're sticking to the line of autonomy between the two bodies. So I have had that. I think that talking to Devin was crucial. And I think that Joey within now till, you know, Wednesday should have a chance to sit down and talk to her and Phil as well, just because, you know, this is an unprecedented time. We can't really rely on history. You know, that's like, I mean, that's like asking Obama on how to best deal with like COVID currently. Like his time frame didn't really deal with that. So that being said, I did have a chance to still talk to Kanwar, who was the president a few years back, and he did give me some great insights. But yet again, I think that it's really important to talk to the current administration dealing with the issues that either myself or Joey will be going into dealing with.
Thank you very much, candidates. The next question I have is for Joseph. You talked about a lot of long-term plans for mental health support and action items, but this person wants to know, do you have any tangible short-term mental health action items for the students that you'll be supporting in the 2021 to 2022 term, as opposed to just your long-term plans?
It's a fair question, Aaron, and I feel like I've not done enough to emphasize it itself, given the breadth of challenges that the lockdown has presented to students' mental health and considering it's going to continue for the foreseeable future, like next year's president should have some reasonable short-term goals and actionable items to deliver upon them. While I've not explicitly mentioned strategic vision for my short-term goals, my action plan, at least in the short term, is to continue the work of the Student Wellness Center, particularly in coordination with its current wellness coordinator, Heather Landels, who I spoke to about the challenges of delivering wellness services in an online medium. She's run a lot of workshops, both through residents, the Wellness Center itself, as well as the Wellness Education Center. Some students may remember next to the dining hall back in the pre-lockdown days. Lovely person to talk to, Heather Landels, but she and I have helped better understand, she's helped me rather better understand exactly what issues are affecting students' short-term mental health amidst the challenges of online learning. And it comes to a collection of different issues associated with academic and non-academic stresses of remote learning. Obviously, the stay-at-home order that the province recently put out has not done wonders, considering the benefits we all would have gotten from long walks and fresh air and good exercise. Communing with people outside our families has done a number, and they're not helping. But it's my hope that as soon as I enter office, students will start to see the immediate benefits of being able to go back outside for good reasons again, that we'll see the curve starting to flatten, and we'll be able to deliver intentional programming that allows students to see short-term benefits and alleviated wellness as far as the short term goes. Now, as through an online medium, of course, the delivery is less easy. In the past, the Wellness Education Center has run a series of workshops that are ideally tailored to help students better understand how to cope with a lot of the issues that they're dealing with, primarily from an educational standpoint, teaching them good organizational skills, good time management, helping them understand that the stresses of academics are very, very normal, that no student is alone in dealing with all the challenges that come with a university career. And knowing that we've all been affected by both the stay-at-home order and the stresses of campus-wide lockdown, it's become clear that we're all in this together, and emphasizing that all of us need to bond together and revitalize our community spirit together as a unified group. If we don't want to see the Laurier community come to an end, that's going to be how we deliver effective short-term change for students.
Thank you very much. We have another question for Joseph from Daniel. And I have just slightly reframed and rephrased the question to make it a little bit more succinct for Joseph. In the last debate, you explained that your EDI task force would have strategic meetings, which you would not want to be a part of because you do not have the lived experience that some of those members would. So you would not want to sit on meetings pertaining to diversity initiatives. So why do you feel it is better for a diversity executive to handle the task force as opposed to you personally as president?
Right. So I need to make that very clear, Daniel. I think there was a slight misinterpretation in what I said last week. And in fairness, I worry that I may not have communicated it as effectively as I could. My idea for the EDI task force next year is not to impose my own views upon the task force and achieving meaningful policy. Now, that's not to say that I won't be a part of it. I fully intend to attend those meetings and understand what perspectives I'm missing out on because of my own lived experiences and lack thereof, those that other students have that I don't. I intend to sit on those meetings and understand how I can challenge the culture of exclusivity that so many potential union volunteers have complained about. It's how we achieve meaningful change, but by no means am I going to adopt a hands-off approach to this thing. I'm not intending to hire a certain student executive and say, diversity is your problem, now deal with it. That's not my approach. It's wrong-minded to do that. Instead, I'm intending to sit on the council and listen and learn to the opportunities and the experiences of people who've experienced systemic discrimination, either in person or through certain practicing or certain exclusionary practices that the union may have perpetuated. It's not my intention to come in and start talking about my own perspectives or what I see as the problems for marginalized communities, because I think, Dan, you and I can agree it's not a good idea for me to say, here's what I think your problem is. It's not a good look. So that's where I want to listen and learn to groups that are part of this task force and take their initiative to create meaningful policy and change that challenges the culture of exclusivity. I need to be very, very clear about this. I do not want to take this hands-off approach. I want to be a part of it, but I don't want to domineer an issue that's not mine to dominate.
Thank you very much for the clarification and the response, Joseph. We have a submitted question for Pega next. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you have 1 year left at the Senate and the Board of Governors. If true, would you be resigning from those positions to focus on your presidency if elected?
So I have considered it, but I did make a commitment to these positions. And at the same time, I think that it gives me a unique insight to what is going on. Obviously, I think that I do need to consult with both groups, Board of Governors and the Senate, to make sure that there's no conflicts. But as of regulation, there does not seem to be any conflict of interest in me participating in both roles or all three roles. So I think that if everything turns out well, I'll be able to hold all three positions with one another.
Thank you very much, Pega, and thank you for the question, whoever that was. I was also curious about that myself. Another submitted question for you, Pega. What are the 4 main ends or purposes of the Students' Union?
So I definitely studied this, as I did study for any test or quiz. I went through everything that I could, and I actually have them written down right next to me. So safe, sustainable environment, quality academic experience, diverse, equitable, diversity and equitable and services. Sorry, I actually wrote it down. So I think those are what they were looking for.
Thank you very much, Pega. We have another question for Joseph now. It's from Ty Thomas. Joseph, you've mentioned that you have avoided reaching out to Devin and the rest of the student executive team because you believed it would be difficult to gain meaningful information from them. However, as I believe candidate Pega touched on a bit in her answer, these are people who have a unique experience working in the SU during the COVID-19 pandemic. As president, you will likely work with people that you don't always see eye to eye with. So why did you not set aside your differences with the current student executive team in order to have discussions about the current state of the Students' Union with them?
Right, Ty. I think the question is fair, Ty, in the interest of honesty, but I worry that it's based on a false premise that I was unwilling to lay aside differences. Part of my hesitance to reach out to this year's executive team is largely based off of experiences I've had with particular people who know who they are. I'm not going to mention names. This is not about stirring the pot. But Ty, at least based on your own experiences and some conversations we've had, I think you should be intimately aware of the culture of exclusivity that the union has perpetuated. You've expressed reserved opinions about certain members of the executive team, even at the topmost level. And I'd be happy to know that you've been able to put aside your differences and some things you may or may not have said about this year's president. But I'm wondering why you may not be as empathetic towards my hesitance. That said, without dabbling again into drama, part of the reason why I was more keen to reach out to previous presidents was to understand what remains constant and endures about a president's role, despite all challenges that come year after year. Certainly, COVID is an unprecedented challenge. But in that same vein, I reckon that each president has had to come and go each year with their own set of unique challenges that face them. And perhaps not on the scale of COVID. I'm not going to say that anything Tyler Van Hertzel did necessarily was as difficult as having to navigate through all the COVID situation, but they've had their own set of challenges to deal with. And speaking to them has helped me much better understand exactly what I can do to uphold the core expectations of the role. Knowing I've had the hands-on experience as a director and have worked with President Brar around the discussion table, that's given me a good idea of what a president should uphold. And speaking with both his successors and predecessors has reaffirmed a lot of the lessons. Now, as far as the COVID situation goes, Ty, certainly, like this year, faced unprecedented challenges. And I want to emphasize, in case you've forgotten along the way, that the president's role, especially as it pertains to university affairs, is to communicate with the student governments of other universities across Ontario. It's an extension of UNSA and the work we do there. On top of that, we have a great relationship with the University of Woodley Federation, who are dealing with very similar difficulties on their campus. So understanding how other presidents, other universities, as well as this one, have done to accommodate the needs of students during the COVID situation will give me that breadth of experience that I may not have gotten through a semester of talking to Devin and her team. But I'd also like to mention that should I be elected, it's my obligation to connect with Devin and her team to better understand how I can transition into the role and pick up where she may leave off in May. So by all means, should I be elected, I fully intend to make sure that both my team and the executive team of the organization understand what we may be getting into should the time come. When we come to hiring our VPs and AVPs, they'll need to understand what all this year's VPs and AVPs have done so far to affect meaningful change. And that's something that I'm going to make sure is crystal clear in the 3 months we have between the election and my entering office. By all means, I intend to connect with the current team if I'm elected. But before then, I didn't see any meaningful change or knowledge that I could have gleaned that could not have been gotten from their predecessors.
Thank you very much for another thorough response, candidates. We are making some very good time at tonight's event. We still have about a half hour left before the scheduled end. It seems we do not have any further questions currently. So if there's anybody in the audience who would like to ask any final questions to the candidates before I allow them to finish off with any final questions that they have for each other, I would appreciate it. If our current president, Devin Kelly, has any questions that they would like to ask her successor, I would encourage it at this time as well. I think it'd be wonderful to get that perspective. But I will give you guys a moment. If there's a question, a last minute question that you would like to ask, this will be your final opportunity to ask questions to the next president of the Students' Union in a public format. So I would encourage you to do so because the next time that you ask these questions, one of them will be elected. Good. All right. Then for the last half hour, candidates, I will allow you to ask and rebut any final questions that you have for each other. We'll start with Pega. Are there any questions that you have for Joseph?
Sorry, Aaron, I don't know if you just saw Daniel just asked another question. I don't know if you wanted to address that or I can go into mine.
Yeah, it's a quick question. Joseph, it's related to the EDI initiative and task force. How are you planning on handling compensation? Are they going to be compensated similar to like a part-time or full-time role, or is it going to be volunteer-based? How is compensation going to work?
So at this time, it may be worth pointing out that my action plan does not specifically outline a series of compensation for any members of the task force. And that's because in doing the research for how to effectively and feasibly make this promise, Daniel, information just wasn't made available to me, that was publicly available at least, on whether or not this is something the student union could fun. And so rather than saying I'm going to pay volunteers to do this project instead of full-time or part-time, I would rather not make the promise than say people will get paid and then immediately sweep the rug out from under them. It's not my style as a leader. It's wrong to do that. Tariq knew that when he started the idea initially. And it's something that I want to carry forward. I'm not going to tell people that they're going to get paid and then immediately fail to deliver, especially considering it concerns their financial needs. So at this time, I envision an entirely volunteer-based task force of members of these marginalized communities. The specialized student executive I had intended to be a compensated position, as they will be directly responsible for communicating with me. It would effectively be a job for them to chair the task force, guide the conversation from the contributing members, and report back to me as far as meaningful conversation goes. And that part does need to be made clear. They're going to report to me so that I have a clear understanding of the policy that I, as president, can then initiate, but I will still be there at those task force meetings. That said, as far as compensation goes, I can't promise funding at this time. I don't have the numbers for next year's budget. I don't know what kind of amenities could be afforded to these potential volunteers. And so I am not going to tell them they're going to get paid for work that I just can't deliver upon. It's not right. So at this time, I'm envisioning entirely volunteer-based one, and I'm imagining that based off of the university's feedback from students within these affected communities, and those that have faced systemic discrimination, considering that there was enough pushback against anti-racism in the past couple of years to justify President Zeb McClatchy's new EDI action plan, it clearly demonstrates there is a sizable contingency of students from these communities at Laurier who would be willing to voice these concerns, especially if they knew they had the power to affect meaningful change, even without compensation. If they know it will produce results, I'm confident passion for seeing meaningful change and to have their experiences manifested into a meaningful resolution to the issues of discrimination and exclusivity will justify the fact that their work will be volunteer-based.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And it looks like we have a question for both candidates from Devin Kelly. I appreciate it. I love to see a question about passion. It's wonderful. So candidates, what part of your platforms are you most passionate about, and how exactly do you plan to accomplish it? So if you could please choose one specific platform point that you are the most passionate and have the greatest amount of understanding about, and walk us through who you would need to speak to and work within the university to accomplish it, and how long approximately it might take you to bring that point into fruition. So we'll start with Pega.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a little hard because I'm passionate about both mental health and also sustainability, but I guess because I've spoken so much about mental health, I'll focus a little bit more on sustainability. So that being said, I want to implement green bins and compost into all residence buildings and Ezra Bricker buildings as well. So I've had a chance to sit down and talk to some people, and first and foremost, we have to work alongside the sustainability office. So once management is implemented, whoever the manager would be then, we also do have to talk to Ezra Bricker themselves, because they do manage our buildings here and also residence initiatives there as well. That being said, I think that it shouldn't take more than potentially 4 months to really sit down, talk to everyone, put it into action. So potentially, May to September. That being said, we've also had to consider, pilot systems and having potentially 1 or 2 Ezra Bricker buildings utilize it first to see how well that does. And then, there's a lot of different pieces that we have to consider, such as how well it works and if we have to create an enhanced awareness as to how to utilize it best. So that being said, that was just something that I had considered, something that we can easily put into fruition.
Thank you very much. Joseph, the same question to you.
All right. First, massive credit to PEGA's initiative. I think sustainability is a very, very admirable strategic goal. And certainly, if I'm elected president, I'm hoping that that may be an issue that we may consult each other about. I'd be very, very happy to work with you to achieve meaningful change for sustainability-oriented goals. Now, as far as my own passion project goes, I've made it very, very clear that my affinity is for indulging and embracing the views and the contributions of younger students and getting them involved with the political process here at Laurier. Through my work and communication and the action plans that I've laid out, I'd like to see those first years empowered to speak out, engage with our union, and hear back in ways that past presidents just haven't before. To that end, I see my plan for a revolutionized O-Week as one of the cornerstones of my presidential term. Even if next year's O-Week may be again an all-remote service, knowing that I will be laying down the framework for that revolutionized service so that the president after me would have a solid action plan to make sure that every student who's missed out so far has an opportunity to benefit from one of the best experiences that Laurier has to offer. That is something I'm passionate about, making sure that an entire cohort or even two don't miss out just because of bad timing. It's one of the biggest things that I'm looking to develop. It's one of the biggest things that I'm keen to work with the current executive team to see manifested into a meaningful action plan. And it's something that I've spoken to past presidents about, many of whom have given their seals of approval to the idea. Of course, it goes without saying that I was most pleased to know that Tariq Plummer himself thought that it was the right idea to ensure an equitable experience for those cohorts, very much along the values that he had in mind. But even hearing from some of my the other folks that I'm looking to embody, the values of folks like Talha Naeem, for example. He said, Joey, provide these students across Waterloo and Brentford with the opportunity that they would miss otherwise. Such a great opportunity at Laurier, and you will see those returns to engagement and get our Maclean's ranking right back up to #1, Joey. Student satisfaction is core to the president's approach next year, whoever it might be, me or PEGA. If we're going to get that Maclean ranking back up, we need to do it through a massive program that's going to really help next year's students understand what they may have missed.
Thank you very much, candidates. Another wonderful question from Devin. A lot of your platform points rely on an in-person return to campus. So if you are president during a time where online learning is still the primary method of delivery, how will you adapt your platform points to ensure execution despite an online environment? So PEGA, you can answer this question first.
So in no offense to Devin, but I think most to all of my platform points are all things that we could really implement if we are virtual, such as, working alongside BetterHelp that she had suggested last year. I think that was a great initiative. BetterHelp is a completely online resource. Having a web bot to work with students to have them understand what resources are available and how to best access them is also something that we have virtually. To have someone from wellness come in, a mental health nurse, which I had mentioned, to come into all our classrooms could be also done virtually. O-Week programming, all the stuff that I want to add to it, yet again, if we are having O-Week programming, which we do every year, is all stuff that I want to add to it permanently and virtually as well. And going on to green bins and so on, we still do have students in residence, and we do definitely have students here at Ezra Bricker. I live in an Ezra Bricker home myself. So those are things that we could also have put in mind. Yes, there are things like Go Bus that I've mentioned, especially advocacy for Brantford campus and having them subsidize their costs, especially since many of them are commuters. But I think that that's something that we could implement for future years. So I don't think that that would necessarily go unconsidered. And Greek life advocacy and so on, those are all virtual. So I think that almost everything that I put on my platform was in consideration with COVID regulation.
Thank you very much, Pega. And Joseph, the same question to you. If you're a president during a time where online learning is still the primary method of delivery, how will you adapt your platform to ensure execution despite a primarily online environment?
The short answer to the question of do I have short-term plans for a continuing lockdown situation, Aaron, is my platform is built off of a long-term vision and short-term actionable items. Things like creating the task force, hiring envoys between our faculty associations, renovating the website, and getting sure that each club and association that's coming in next year knows exactly what it's meant to provide. Those kind of actionable items are very, very feasible with or without a lockdown situation. It boils down to communication, which can be delivered through an online media, whether or not we're all on campus or off. So as far as the biggest idea goes, and the biggest theme for a continuing lockdown situation goes, from my presidency, I want it to be that we have made it much clearer what the union will be doing every step of the way to accomplish meaningful change. Now, short-term actions and items and vision are difficult to narrow down. And I have to give Devin and her team some credit here because of the uncertain nature of the pandemic. I'm sure Devin and his team certainly knew that they probably developed a contingency plan for a post-lockdown situation or very close. And then all of a sudden, a few weeks ago, we got the stay-at-home order, and that probably threw a wrench in the works. So I have to give Devin and her team massive credit for adapting to changing circumstances. But part of the difficulty with setting out a long-term action plan for a lockdown situation is that anything can happen with the pandemic that can totally throw that plan into the bin. It'll make it effectively useless or obsolete. So that's where I'm taking things on a case-by-case approach, work with the limits that are imposed to us by the town of Waterloo and Brantford, by the province of Ontario, and by the federal government, adapt to changing circumstances, and work with our stakeholders inside the university and outside, among students in particular, to make sure that not only are our actions feasible and in line with pandemic protocols, but that students know exactly what they are and how they are going to help them every step of the way through those monthly updates, through Zoom Q&As, lecture circuits, the monthly checklist, which I cannot beat to death enough. Students are going to know what is going on every step of the way. If the situation gets more uncertain, I want to at least make the union stance on the issues much clearer to students as they cope with that.
Very much, candidates. We have another strong submitted question, and it relates to the health and dental plan referendum question that students are going to be voting on. For any of you who may not be entirely aware, I will quickly summarize it. It just has to do with increasing, if I remember correctly, increasing the fee slightly so that the health and dental plan can cover a more comprehensive range of services. I think oral contraceptives was listed on that. If the current health and dental plan and O-Week referendum questions do not pass, how will you work with the staff next year to fill in those gaps that might have been created due to the questions failing? So if the current health and dental plan and O-Week referendum questions fail, how are you going to work with the staff next year to help fill in those gaps? Pega, you may start.
That was a question I was not expecting, but it's a great question. And, I do have to consider it in this time. Hopefully they do, because I think that would be great for the students. But that being said, I think we do need to talk to Devin and Phil and whoever else works full-time staff to really make sure that we budget ourselves appropriately to make sure that that is in no way, shape, or form going to hinder students' ability to do well and enjoy their time here at the university. I think that it would not be great. It would not be great, but I think that we could work within that to make sure that students get the best experience needed alongside what policies we already have and what fees we currently do also have. That being said, I think you all should vote to have these referendums passed, but that's all that I can say to it.
Thank you very much, Pega. Joseph, the same question to you. If the current health and dental plan and OWEEK referendum questions do not pass, how will you work with the staff next year to help fill in those gaps?
So speaking pragmatically for a moment, Aaron, I'm going to cite my own experience with election seasons in the past, over the past 5 years, and say that realistically speaking, referendum questions pass. The only issue is, the only obstacle that tends to block their passing is if fees tend to be worked into the wording of the question itself. It's a pragmatic response, and I know it's not a particularly empathetic one, but I'm confident that it will pass, knowing that it does specifically cater to a need that a lot of students, particularly I've spotted at Laurier, as we've seen over the past year, resonated with in particular. Just a few days ago, I spoke with the referendum chair for this question, Owen Burry. I spoke with the VP of University Affairs and her AVP, Julie Pereira and Brooke Snyder, respectively. So if people say I haven't spoken to the executive team, I guess I have in some way. But they worked with me to help understand the breakdown of the associated fee for the health plan coverage. And based on what I heard, I'm confident in saying that it effectively delivers the best solution possible for the oral contraception issue, as well as expanding coverage for a range of other in-demand services. And based on what I've heard so far, which part of which is difficult for me to communicate because of confidentiality reasons, but from what I've heard so far about what will be covered by that expanded healthcare option, it's well worth a yes vote in this campaign season. I am very pleased that Pega is getting behind this, and I can very readily say the same, in that I endorse the plan as it exists, as it's presented in the referendum question. And I would strongly encourage students to vote for it, to achieve that meaningful change that we've seen students have wanted. If anyone's in doubt, they can just check Stutter at Laurier and know what's been missing this past year to fill in the gaps. As far as that goes, if filling the gaps isn't possible, and if for some reason the referendum question does not pass, my team and I will work around the clock to ensure that University Affairs is working with ESA and other relevant stakeholders to develop a good stopgap measure that can effectively deliver on what's been missing from the plan in time for students to receive that demanded service. We'll make sure that it's well considered and has the input of the Wellness Center and the administrators who run the healthcare plan for the university, Blue Cross and Student VIP, but that it's an effective solution that students will be able to receive and opt into in a timely manner.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you very much, Pega. I will do one final question before we move into kind of the closing parts. So I appreciate everybody who has been submitting questions, and I appreciate you, Devin, for your 3 strong questions that you have submitted tonight. I also thank the candidates who have been giving some very strong answers and rebuttals to each other as well. It's been very entertaining from my perspective. So the final question from the audience tonight for both candidates: what has been the biggest challenge that you as a student have experienced or heard about related to online learning, and what would you do to try and mitigate it for students in incoming years? And we'll start with Pega for this question.
Yeah, so I guess I'm gonna go with a topic that I haven't really touched upon. I personally have had a bit of issues with textbooks, online textbooks, and I actually had to call and sit down in office hours and talk to my professor. And when I told her that I was running, she was very open to start telling me about all the things she wishes that I could do if I was elected. And one of the things was simply just, you know, having someone pick up the phone. And I didn't really think of that or consider that at first, but I was like, whoa, I don't know why that didn't cross my mind. But that's, I guess, the good part of consultation, like you hear things that you wouldn't have originally considered. So, you know, just making sure that, you know, it doesn't take a lot to have the directory redirect phone calls to personal lines that clearly people are still working in the bookstore. We still have a lot of staff still working, but instead of just having them answer emails, you know, petition them to maybe answer phone calls, because as a student in online learning, it becomes so hard to deal with it. So I definitely agree with that point. And if we do continue in it going into September, that is definitely something that I will make sure to address.
Thank you very much, Becca. And Joseph, the same question to you.
Got to say, that's actually a really excellent point that Pega's brought up, the accessibility of textbooks. It ties into one of the biggest concerns that I've picked up on from some of the experiences I've had with my team members and students I've spoken to from all different walks of life across campus, and that is the accessibility of in-person assistance for particular departments, or lack thereof. Like, there is no in-person service effectively. Back when we were all on campus, we knew where we could go to receive particular help for either academic or non-academic advice. We knew where the offices were for professors and for faculties, the Student Health Center, Student Support, the Financial Aid Center, of course, the Welcome Center, Laurier International. We had a central hub on campus where we could go and talk to a real person to get a catered experience that helped us understand that. And knowing now that even the phone lines aren't operational now for students to have that option, knowing that all correspondence with relevant services on both campuses is all done through cold emails, it's taken its toll on students, especially those who don't know what they're supposed to be emailing in the first place. Like, how are students in art supposed to get consultation about their potential career opportunities if they don't know that they can email either artsadvising@wlu.ca or career advising? It's career center. It's astounding that these online directories just are not explicitly clear for students who have these questions. So great at answering questions from professor to student. Certainly that correspondence is fine. But as far as accessing non-academic services that students do still need, it's not helpful to not know where you have to go to get these services. It's been hurting students and adding to that stress on top of the low energy of having to go through remote learning, not being on the campuses we love, not being able to see the people we love and get involved in the clubs and associations we love. It all feeds into this feeling of neglect and this dourness that's come to define this past year. So that's something that I'd like to explore as well. My advocacy team and I at the University Affairs Department would really like to help ensure that the university itself is making online directories and student support services much, much clearer to students who just wouldn't know who to ask for these kind of questions otherwise.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Now, before I move into my final question, before we move into final comments and closing statements, I want to give the candidates one more opportunity to ask one more final question that they have for the opposite candidate. In the interest of time, we won't have a rebuttal period, so please make sure when you are phrasing your question to your opponent, keep in mind we're only going to do one question and answer for each. So we'll start with Joseph. You have one final question you would like to ask your opponent.
Hi there. Recognizing that anything can happen by the end of the week. By the end of the week, you might be president or I might be president. Would you still be willing to consult with either me or members of my team to ensure that the values we have that we've discovered through good research and a developed feasible action plan for may be implemented for students' benefits, even if it's not under my name?
Good question.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna lie, you're clearly well researched, and I really do appreciate that. So if I were to be elected, don't get me wrong, I think that a lot of the things that you've mentioned and you've brought up are things that I would really like to consult you with and make sure that I'm considering taking part of, especially when it comes to those monthly checklists that you mentioned Tariq had done or had mentioned in his platform. And you clearly seem to be very insightful on the Brantford campus. So, you know, any insights that you might have there would be really great, because at the end of the day, a lot of what I've mentioned is just consultation and advocacy. So I'm definitely gonna stand here and listen to whatever you have to say. And I really do hope that it is a shared sentiment.
Thank you very much. And Pega, your final question for your opponent.
Yeah, so with your equity task force or your initiative, would you reconsider that? Because as a person of color and someone who's had a chance to sit down with others, I think that, and in no offense, like I think I understand the sentiment of it being an inclusive environment, and what you're doing is, I understand why you said it, and I think that it was very nice of you to put that there. But I think that it might be a little bit of a band-aid solution. Would you reconsider that in future? That's literally the entire question. Would you reconsider it?
It's a fair question, Pega, but given the amount of consultation that I did with different stakeholder associations around Laurier that fall under the Center of Student Equity umbrella, given the fact that this was an unrealized initiative that Tariq started, that I would like to pick up the pieces from so that I can carry forward his legacy and have my own touch if possible. That does bring it very near and dear to my heart. And the feedback I've received from a lot of students, particularly international students in particular, is that the issue isn't short-sighted in just helping me specifically understand what marginalized communities have to experience and how to help them. It's not just about empowering me as president. It's about ensuring that the visibility and representation of marginalized communities in the student union is far greater expanded. It's a systemic issue, the issue of exclusivity within the union, and it feeds into a culture that several volunteers have said before, from these communities have expressed to me before, that they feel left out of because they just find it difficult to overcome those cultural barriers, to be welcomed into the fold fully, to know that there are things going on that they just aren't getting invited to for unfair reasons. It bears very heavily upon my platform, Pega, and that's why I'm specifically attached to it. That said, I recognize that I'm a particularly ends-focused person. I believe that the results of the initiative may justify whatever cost we put into it. And so if there's a situation where people from marginalized communities at Laurier, students, just do not engage with the task force, if feedback is consistently negative and they feel as if, like you say, it's a band-aid solution, then I can work around that. If it is not achieving the intended results, which I can't be certain of at this time, I'd have to wait to see what kind of perspectives we're able to see, and if students feel that this culture of exclusivity is being challenged. If that's not happening, then I would reconsider. That's after we've put it into implementation, giving it a pilot run, and see how students engage with it. If it is not achieving meaningful change for the purposes of diversity, equity, and inclusivity, then I would consider revising or entirely scrapping it, but only under those circumstances. I still want to give those students that deserve a chance that chance to have their opinions heard and know that they contribute to meaningful actions.
Thank you very much, Joseph. It seems like we're almost out of time, so we are going to move into closing statements. Candidates, I'm going to give you 2 minutes each. As a reminder, this is your second to last opportunity to make a public statement to the voting student body, because at the end of the week, one of you will be president. So I would encourage you to take this time to say anything else that you feel is important to your campaign, to your platform, to the Laurier ownership. And we will start this time with Pega. You'll have 2 minutes for closing remarks.
So I guess if this is one of the last of the few times that I'll get to address the students before elections, I would like to say that I'm so happy that so many people tuned in just tonight, because I know that this is a long debate, and even last time was quite long. So I'm happy that you guys came out and you sat through this and you endured all my everything that I've said. And I do want to also mention that I'm extremely thankful for all those who have been very open to talking with me, Devon's administration, and all those who have even reached out to me after I've started campaigning to really sit down and tell me what they feel might have been changed in my platform or added to my platform. So I really do support that. And I think that's a great start if I am elected to my presidency. That being said, I also want to thank my team, Jen, who has been my campaign manager, and Sam, who is sitting in the other room watching this, who has been my great policy director. I want to thank you all for helping me, and I couldn't have asked for a better team, and I think that's all. So make sure that you go vote no matter who you're voting for, because it is very meaningful. And to all those who donated, thank you.
Thank you very much, Pega. And Joseph, the same opportunity to you as well. You'll have 2 minutes for closing remarks.
I'd also like to take some time quickly to echo huge thanks and appreciation for all the folks who've tuned in through all my ramblings to try to decipher the weird accent. Totally understandable. But above it all, I want to thank my team, of course, the massive support and investments they've put in to make this a success so far, to have got me this far. To Tariq, of course, Kevin, Dana, Talha, Michael, you've done an immense job in crafting the potential president that you see in front of you. I can go on and list off the folks dating all the way back to my first year who I would like to thank. And so I don't want to put them out to dry necessarily, but with the very limited time I do have left, I want to encourage all students to vote this coming Wednesday to Friday, preferably earlier, sooner the better, but do your research. While I do have very limited time as well, I'd like to issue a recommendation that you read into the referendum questions this year. All 4 of them are, as far as I've been informed, incredibly beneficial, especially in mitigating the challenges of online learning this year. The health and dental revision referendum question in particular, that sounded a major issue that so many students expressed. I encourage people to vote yes on it. The Laurier transition implementation fee, expansion of the available 101 fee for Head Start services and transition services, amazing. Renewal of the student life levy fees in both Waterloo and Brentford are going towards amazing causes, particularly the alumni field restoration and the renovation of the One Market Centre in Brentford. They tie in very specifically to action plans that I've outlined in my platform. So I am incredibly encouraging you to support and vote yes to those initiatives. All amazing ideas, but do your own research and, possible, ensure that you are voting to ensure that you and your fellow students have the best opportunities to thrive and get our student satisfaction up to what it was.
Candidates, I will simply say at the end of this week, one of you will be elected the next president of the Students' Union. I want to say that I'm honored to have been involved and participate in that process for the 2nd year. Both of you guys have done a wonderful job, put in a lot of work into your campaigns. You should be proud of that no matter the results. Anyone who says it is easy to do this is kidding themselves, because it is absolutely not. So that is an accomplishment in and of itself, that you have been nominated and that you have come this far. So I want you both to be able to pat yourselves on the back for that. Thank you for coming out to these events. It has been wonderful getting the chance to get to know each of you more and to talk to you and hear the concerns and questions from the student body. We appreciate it. And to both of you, I will say good luck.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks very much, Aaron. It's been a pleasure.
Of course. To the rest of you, I hope you have a fantastic night. And to everyone, I hope you have a wonderful week. And I can't wait to see what the week brings.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming in.
Take
Thank
care,
you,
guys.
PJ, and thank you, Joey.
Thank you.
We'll see you around.
Have a good one.